Modernism versus Postmodernism by the Cliché Crocodiles, Colin Adler, Chandler Leach, Joey Bridgham, Kira Gallagher, Maddie Graham, and Sierra Freer.
What is modernism? Modernism was a series of movements in culture, in art, and all tons of stuff that took hold in the late 19th and earliest 20th century. It was actually at the end of World War I, and it lasted all the way until the start of World War II. The word modernism refers to movements in art, literature, and culture. War and industrialization devalued the individual. Global communication made the world seem like a small place. Modernism aimed to break the traditional writing style. As They Lay Dying was a great example of this. As They Lay Dying had switching perspectives pretty much every single chapter, which was new during that time. It was an example of something called Southern modernism. Modernism was all about making things new, and authors trying out different things and experimenting different things. And actually, poet Eliza Pound introduced this phrase, "make it new." It's basically an idea that encourages writers to experiment and just try out different stuff when writing.
There are a lot of modernist authors, some being Ezra Pound, who supported Mussolini during the World War II, and was later imprisoned by American troops and then sent to a hospital for the clinically insane, along with the famous Robert Frost. There is plenty of modernist literature out there addressing various subjects, such as the poem Harlem, which talks about the Harlem Renaissance. Another famous poem is a Robert Frost poem, The Road Not Taken.
The first example of modernism is The Wasteland, a poem by T.S. Eliot. In the poem, Eliot shares his personal experiences after World War I. This is the most famous modernist poem. He also reveals some universal truths. One quote from the poem is, "There is the empty chapel." This reflects the modernist ideas and that people were moving away from religion and towards Enlightenment ideas and knowledge. The second quote, "For you know only a heap of broken images," also represents people's desire to be more knowledgeable and learn about science. The second example of modernism is the short story Tickets Please by D.H. Lawrence. This short story is set during World War I in a ticketing booth in the UK. It talks about the shifting gender roles in the time of modernism and the Freudian theories that popped up when science became more prevalent.
So what is postmodernism? Postmodernism can be defined as a form of literature characterized by the use of metafiction, unreliable narration, self-reflexivity, intertextuality, and historical and political issues. It also really focuses on how the narrator or narrators become individualistic and how they reach their own version and potential in reality. So these are some elements of postmodernism. For multiple narratives and unreliable narrators, this can be seen in the novel we're reading right now called As I Lay Dying. Although As I Lay Dying is between the modern era and the postmodern era, it still contains characteristics of the postmodern era, like having multiple narrators like Darrell, Dewey Dell, Toll, Jewell, etc. Bricolage focuses on the creation from a diverse range of available things, and intertextuality is focusing on the relationship between texts. So parody and multiple realities are other elements of postmodernism as well. So for the history of postmodernism, the time period is around mid to late 20th century, so this can be anywhere from 1940s, 1950s, and up. And it questions the basic assumptions of Western philosophy, meaning the modern era really wanted to find reasoning and truth behind life, and with this postmodern era, there's no search for an abstract truth in life. And the postmodern era had a big social impact. It really defined how society progressed from the modern era, and there was a collapse of distinction between art and everyday life. So this mainly just means that art and popular culture combined to make one. So all the art is more common and integrated into our everyday lives. And this also allowed for religious diversity because since we're not searching for one abstract truth, there are more ideas that are welcomed regarding religious activity.
Here are some of the most famous postmodern authors. For poets, there's Denise Levertov, John Ashbery, and Allen Ginsberg, who is also a Beat Generation writer. Jorge Luis Borges was a short storyteller who wrote about metafiction. And with most of these authors, parts of their stories or novels had an aspect of something crazy or outlandish, like someone having telepathy or years being named words instead of numbers. Here are some examples of postmodern works. To read a couple, there's Mumbo Jumbo, Invisible Cities, and Lolita. One common thread between a lot of these is that the plot defies science. Since postmodernism was a rebuttal to modernism, and modernism was largely about science and reason, postmodernists did not agree with science, and a lot of the parts of their stories are mythical or fictional and could not scientifically happen. Another common thing is that they're set during World War II, because postmodernism really started after World War II. Our first example of postmodernism is the novel Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. This novel was set during World War II and is about the fighter pilots and the rule Catch-22. Catch-22 basically means that if you're insane, you don't have to go fly and fight, but if you put in a form to not go fly and fight, then that's perceived as sane. So there's no way of getting out of fighting. This novel pokes fun at the military and questions the authority of it, and it's very satirical. Another example of postmodernism is the novel Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon. Pynchon was actually thought to be mentally ill, and the novel was thought to be about schizophrenia. But in the novel, a World War II lieutenant is trying to find the source of some rocket launches by Nazis. If you actually look at the summary, it's pretty inappropriate and kind of humorous. So the whole story is pretty satirical and pokes fun at the military and World War II. A quote from the book is, "Through the machineries of greed, pettiness, and the abuse of power, love occurs." Alright, to sum it up, let's do a comparison. Modernism was after World War I, whereas postmodernism was after World War II. Modernism had a lot of ideas about enlightenment and science and universal truths, whereas postmodernism rejected modernism and all of the scientific ideas. In modernist literature, the writers wanted to break the traditional writing style and rules and make everything new. Whereas in postmodernism, writers challenged authority, used unreliable narration, and had plots that defied science.